Okay, so final video details. Right now I'm working on the smallest areas, so this will be the most specific. So when you're being the most specific, you're consciously making a decision where you're gonna paint wet, where you're gonna paint thick, where you're gonna use just solid color, and most of the time you're going to use the smallest brushes you have. So in this portion of the lessons, I'm going to be focusing on the eyes, like the iris, the eyeball, the wrinkles, the eyebrows, the lips, corners in the ears, hair follicles, like he has little freckles. And obviously those are very tiny things, so I'm going to be using really tiny small brushes. Right now I'm using some burnt umber, and I'm creating some dark, like a dark tint that I saw in his eye under the green. Like when I looked at his picture, you keep your reference right next to you. I'm looking at it and I see a little bit of like this darkish brown color and this very faint green, and it gives this appearance of his brown eyes. Now I'm using burnt umber for the wrinkles. Got some paint from my palm. It's no biggie. Using like a wet burnt umber to do those wrinkles in the corner of his eyes. And you notice when you're doing a lot of painting is stroking in the same direction, like in a direction that whatever your object is flowing in. Hey, sorry that my hand is in the way. But you see, I'm looking back and forward from the reference, trying to fill in the eyelashes and those corners on the eyes. Filling in the actual bright spot of the eyeball, which a lot of people tend to make solid white, but I've noticed on a lot of pictures, it's a very grayish color. But always look at the reference you have, because your reference may be a bluish color, maybe a really white color. But don't color things, like I said in the color video, the color that you think they are or that you know they are. Here I'm just taking some wet burnt umber, and it's wet, but the brush is not watery. So remember I said it's a difference when you're using wet on wet, having the brush watery versus having the brush still dry. So I'm just putting the hair in there, and I'm going to paint over that wet a little afterwards. That way the hair won't be so noticeable. You check this out. And here's where I do a little line work, catching those wrinkles under the chin, maintaining those values. And I'm also putting the freckles and the spots he has on his throat. I'm gonna go closer to the face. So this is a very very tiny round brush, and again it's wet, but it's not, the brush doesn't have a lot of water in it, so it's very light, or not opaque, for lack of a better words. These are details that are not used with thick paint right here. Okay, so here I'm going to be blocking it a little bit. So since you won't be able to see that well, I'm going to explain that the dots that are on his face, from the reference picture, it's kind of like porous. So the areas where his face is like really lit up, I'm using a darker color, like the Mars yellow that I have out. And I have it, wet, of course. And where the values of his face are dark, I'm using a lighter color, closer to the cat red, mixed with a little bit of the Titan buff. And again, it's wet. So I'm just identifying those pores with different colors. And this is like realistic / expression portrait, but they come out so well and they make good commissions. So I zoomed in so I could work on the nose and put some of those pores in on the side of the cheek. You can see it there. I'm sorry my hand is in the way right here, but I'm about to change this angle soon. Alright, so now I'm using the wet to do some of the wrinkles in his forehead. And I'm going wet. This is like a preference thing. I like going wet for wrinkles in the forehead. Some people like going a little bit thick. That way you can actually see the line. But since the wrinkle is like in the light, I want it to go wet. So basically that means I'm using the wet technique I described earlier to create a line instead of a thicker paint on the brush. When I think of wet, I always think of ink washes and stuff like that because it's better to explain. If you ever work with the black ink, a lot of Asian artists made of, it's like a watercolor technique. They change the variety of wetness to create lines and stuff. And you see I'm putting the pores in his head with it looks very white, but in person it doesn't look that bright. But like I said, when you paint over a lot of these pores and stuff like that and blemishes and details, when you paint them in, you tend to paint over them. There I'm using my Van Dyke Brown to get that darkest value, the iris. I'm gonna grab some titanium white here and just put those highlights in. And I looked at the reference. You always gotta look at that reference. It'll tell you everything you need to know. I'm just putting that highlight in with just pure titanium white, no water, no anything. And it just adds a nice touch on those portraits. And we are done, ladies and gentlemen.